My name is Jarrod. I'm the founder of PeopleBunch. So PeopleBunch, just so you know what it's about, it's an all-in-one management platform solution for schools. Today, our aim is to take the stress out of education. But today, what we're focusing on is the Ofsted Toolkit and the new Ofsted framework. The structure of today's event is going to be, we're going to talk heavily about Ofsted, the new framework, what to expect, the toolkit. Then we're going to show you the toolkit, and it's going to be followed by a Q&A where you're going to have the opportunity to ask questions. So feel free to write in the chat and we'll get to that later. To introduce us, so Sarah is going to be with us from a PeopleBunch point of view, so she's going to help us with things on the toolkit. But Nazya works for Ofsted, so she works with Ofsted inspections right now with schools, and her background is as a head teacher. She's been on both sides of the fence, so she's a well-rounded individual on this topic. So Nazya, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's webinar. So we're going on Ofsted Inspection Readiness. Now, there's several elements we're going to go through. However, there's only so much we can cover within this short period we've got. So I'll try to be as detailed as possible on the things that really matter. So whether your inspection is imminent, whether it's expected sometime this year, or it's simply in the horizon over the next year or so, the reality is that inspection readiness is not just about preparing a few weeks beforehand and getting all the paperwork together thinking, okay, I'm in the inspection window. The most successful schools are those that are building readiness into their daily practice. So today I'm going to walk you through aspects of the inspection journey from the time that the notification phone call happens to the final feedback meeting, which is normally on day 2. And we'll explore some of those kind of areas where schools normally become unstuck and where aspects that leaders really need to ensure they are doing so that practice is actually reflective of the evidence that the inspectors will gather up during those 2 days. Inspections are evidence informed and they follow a structured methodology. We know what that methodology is. Ofsted have published the methodology. It's publicly available and it's called the operating guidance. You can find it on the government website. One of the most significant developments in the inspection thinking is the emphasis on whether pupils achieve, belong, and thrive. And when we have our training and when we are having our conversations, we really do focus on those things. Inspectors are increasingly interested in the lived experiences of pupils, particularly those vulnerable groups, and want to know whether the school systems, whether leadership decisions, and whether those improvements are a genuine difference. So it's important to understand the lens through which inspectors view the school. At the heart of any inspection are those simple, powerful questions. Do pupils achieve? And this is academically and personally. And are they prepared for future success? Do pupils feel like they belong? So this is focusing on pupils feeling like valued members of the school community. And this includes attendance, behavior, engagement, and their participation. And do pupils thrive? And this relates to the right systems, having the right systems and processes and the support structures in place that allow every single child to flourish, regardless of their background, regardless of the individual need. So this is why you will notice and you will see through all of the publications and webinars, there's this constant focus on inclusion, safeguarding, leadership, because those are the 3 golden threads that run through every inspection and cover all of these aspects of achieve, belong, and thrive. And what inspectors are really trying to do is they want to know, are schools aware? Are they self-aware? Do school leaders really understand their pupils? Do they understand the barriers to success? Do they have effective systems in place to address those barriers? And most importantly, from an inspector's perspective, this is not a checklist to catch out the schools. This is actually about inspectors having that expectation from leaders that they know their school well. They understand the strengths, they understand the weaknesses, and they can speak confidently about improvement, priorities, and outcomes. So inspection conversations that take place during that whole inspection process are collaborative and professional discussions that are underpinned by the evidence that the leaders present. And those are linked to those elements that I've just spoken about. So part and parcel of that evidence that leaders look at is not just those collaborative conversations that are taking place, but also the documentation, the observations, conversations, and generally looking at pupil experiences. And that is normally done through case sampling. So I'll move on to that in a bit. But before I do, I want to really just talk briefly around the notification call and that planning meeting. So most inspections follow the same kind of structure. You get your notification phone call at 9 a.m. in the morning on a Monday, after which the inspector will arrange for a planning meeting with leadership, normally the head teacher and other leaders present within the school. And it's important for all leaders to recognize that this is not an administrative task. The inspection starts the moment that phone call is made by the inspector. And through that initial, those conversations, through the planning meeting, inspectors are seeking the top level view of the school. They want to know and they want to discuss the context of the school, strengths, priorities. They want to know about attendance, vulnerable groups, what are your inclusion priorities, what are your safeguarding arrangements, and any kind of recent developments. And in essence, they're just trying to understand, are those leaders aware of the school's strengths? Can they explain weaknesses honestly and accurately? Can they give a picture around attendance? Can they articulate the challenges that are being faced by the school community and by vulnerable pupils? And do they have a clear understanding of safeguarding? And do leaders know what the outcomes are for young people that are entering that school community and leaving that school community? So the strongest answers are those when these questions can be answered clearly, confidently, and consistently, because whatever messaging you present during that planning meeting, that is the starting point for every single inspector on the inspector team. So that information from that planning meeting is the information that is spread and distributed between the inspectorate team. We use that as a starting point for all of our conversations moving forward. So it's really important that there's clarity around the information that is presented. Where schools sometimes create concern is where there's vague responses or there's contradictory information, or where schools are over optimistic. So it's really important, and inspectors know no school is perfect, but we want to know, do leaders understand their school? And when you present that clearly, when you provide clarity around that, the conversations then become different. So the most effective preparation for this stage is that senior leaders need to be clear about priorities, challenges, and evidence of improvement. So that's my key nugget for that initial planning meeting, okay? Moving on, inspection is never a one-person performance. Yep, the head teacher remains the central, in the center, front and center. But inspectors will meet and engage with a wide range of staff, deputies, SENCOs, safeguarding leads, attendance lead, inclusion leads, pupil premium leads. And in all of these meetings and discussions, you need to be able to confidently say, this is a school story. And the messaging has to be the same. This should be the benchmark and the starting point of all those conversations. The shared language needs to come out during those conversations so that we know then, and inspectors know, actually, they do understand. They're all saying the same thing. So that information gathering, remember, inspectors are gathering information and gathering evidence, but whilst they're gathering, they're connecting. So when those connections are taking place, when we see shared language and the same message being communicated at different levels of leadership with different people, it really helps us to evaluate more accurately. So and I suppose this is a risk really, and this is something that a lot of school leaders need to be aware of, is inconsistencies. If different leaders are giving different explanations, if staff are talking about different priorities, if there's different interpretations of how vulnerable pupils are supported, it does raise questions about leadership oversight. It does raise questions about implementation. And as inspectors, we take route depending on whatever the information is given. So the professional curiosity that we show is based on the information that is provided to inspectors. And the path that we go down is based on the information that inspectors are given. The strongest schools always ensure that responsibilities and roles are understood across the school. And there needs to be an understanding of what is the wider strategy around how we are making sure young people get the best deal. How are we ensuring that we're improving? How do we know what actions are being taken and what is the outcome that we're seeing? So when those conversations are happening within the school and staff at different levels are aware of each of the information from each of those types of questions, it really enables inspectors to probe in the right way, and really it helps them to get a understanding of leadership oversight. And that is really key, because if you look at the inspection toolkit, school leaders appear at every level in every single evaluation area. And remember, inspectors always start from the expected level. So if you look at the evaluation areas and the standards within the evaluation areas, leaders' decisions, what leaders say, the actions leaders are taking, appear regularly throughout that toolkit. So having a clear understanding about what are we doing to improve, what are the actions that are being taken, what are the outcomes we're seeing, those conversations that are taking place in the school, not because you're just rehearsing answers, but you genuinely understand your area of responsibility, your roles that you're undertaking. You will naturally start having those conversations with those inspectors, and you will naturally have that evidence built up over time. So embedding consistency so that it becomes natural is key here. Moving on, documentation is quite important, because one of the things that the lead inspector does, especially when on day one, is they look at key documentation. So single central record and safeguarding policies, people policy, all of those things are checked. So those are important records, but for different conversations that I had with the leaders. So there's focused leadership discussions that take place around inclusion and attendance and personal development. So those records need to be there, present. Attendance records, send registers, because that's important for the case sampling, behavior records, training records. All of these are building up the evidence base for inspectors, so that providing clarity and providing that bigger picture, and having that data there present. Really, it's not just about compliance, but it's actually about that, again, that leadership oversight. Are leaders presenting information accurately? Are they reviewing the data regularly? based on the data that's collected, what actions have they decided are the priorities? So it really helps us as inspectors see that there is clear oversight in each of those key areas. And we know attendance, inclusion, personal development, CPD, those are really core to the functioning of the school. And we know multiple systems, schools are complex. Multiple systems exist, multiple filing systems exist, there's maybe overlap in responsibilities and roles. So when leaders struggle to locate information, inspectors will reasonably ask, where is the information kept? How do you ensure that information is routinely used to drive improvement? So good evidence should be current as it can be, because obviously schools work on a term-by-term basis normally. It should be accurate and it should be easily accessible, because again, that builds a picture around leadership oversight. And that documentation also tells us a story about leadership decision-making. It tells us that data collection, information gathering is not just a record-keeping activity, it is a decision. It enables secure decisions to be made for the betterment of the school. Moving on, under the new inspection framework, the deep dives have moved away from subjects and moved into the evaluation areas. And one of the most revealing parts of the inspection, which is very different from the old inspection framework, is pupil case sampling. And this is a window into pupils' experiences, and it gives an indication of what is typical. So inspectors select a small group of pupils from different vulnerable groups in the morning of day one inspection. There's normally one person, and one of the team inspectors normally, who is responsible for inclusion, and they will sit with the leaders and they will pick up normally about 6 students from the list that provided. And these include and will include a pupil with EHCP, a pupil receiving SEND support, a looked after pupil, a pupil known to social care, a disadvantaged pupil, or an EL learner. So 6 in total are gathered. And this is quite a powerful activity, because this is where inspectors are testing multiple systems. The inspector who is responsible for inclusion and following those case sample pupils throughout the day is not just exploring inclusion, they're exploring behaviour, academic progress, pastoral support, attendance, quality of classroom practice, all through the experience of those singular pupils. And inspectors will ask, do leaders know this pupil? Do the staff know this pupil? Do the staff know what support needs to be provided so that they are making progress in line with their peers? Do pupils the evidence of work that's being done to improve outcomes for these young people? So it's really important to have a coherence around this. What we really want to see and what inspectors are really looking for is they know schools face challenges. They know students have many barriers in their learning. But what is being done to ensure that support is there and enabling these young people to achieve and thrive and have those outcomes that will enable future success for them? And by following these pupils, it helps inspectors understand whether the school systems of support are genuinely effective. They will ask the pupils, what support do you get in lessons? What happens when you find work difficult? They will look through the work. So they'll do work scrutinies between the case sample pupil and the peers to see how is learning adapted and supported so that pupils achieve the outcomes that they need, these case sample pupils. So that is quite an important task, and it's something that leaders need to be aware of. the inspector will go through what support a pupil is provided with, so their provision in that case sampling meeting. They'll be provided with some kind of support plan, a one-page profile, maybe a provision map, and the inspector will be checking to make sure any information that the leader has given, are they seeing that in practice? And in essence, that's what the learning walks are doing as well. So learning walks, we know, have happened in the old inspection frameworks, but under the new inspection framework, inspectors are expected to visit as many lessons as possible. In some inspections, up to 12, 15 lessons are observed. And through those learning walks, what inspectors really want to see is, does the reality match the narrative that the leaders are communicating? And this is where the inspectors are checking for consistency. They're testing typicality. So the case sampling is one way to test typicality. The learning walks is the other way to that typicality is being tested. Is this the case for everyone? Is adaptive teaching taking place? What are those behavior expectations? What is the support given in classroom at classroom level? And that consistency, again, through those learning walks, paints a picture. Moving on, inclusion. Like we said, inclusion is a deep dive area. So part and parcel of inclusion deep dive was the case sampling, which I've already spoken about. But there's also the inclusion meeting. Now, this is different from what used to happen under the old framework. The inclusion meeting, which is a focused leadership discussion, it focuses on lots of different areas: pupil alternative provision, disadvantaged pupils, vulnerable groups, social care involvement, local authority involvement, those with an EHCP. So it's a really vast. And inspectors really want to understand how effectively are schools identifying barriers to learning. They want to explore the provision for disadvantaged pupils. They want to know what external agency involvement is present and what interventions are used to ensure young people achieve the outcomes that they need to again thrive, achieve, and belong. So the discussion isn't just about provision, it's about an overall strategy, and that's what the inspector will ask. Then the first question, in fact, the inspector will probably ask is, where does inclusion sit within your school development plan? What is your priority for inclusion? What does the inclusion strategy look like for your school? And they're interested in the graduated approach. They want to know what support is planned for. How is it making a difference? How are you ensuring that you're addressing barriers, but you're also maintaining high expectations? So again, that conversation is very much key to those learning walks and that case sampling, because we'll hopefully see whatever has been said in that focused leadership meeting will be seen and present in practice through those learning walks and through that case sampling visits. Moving on, attendance deep dive. This is not too different from the old inspection framework. Again, but it is quite a significant area. When attendance is not right and attendance is an area of concern, it can bring down the grading for schools. And a lot of inspections have highlighted that attendance is an issue. So inspectors will gather, examine attendance data, persistent absence. What is the strategies that is being used to engage families? And what is the overall strategy around improving attendance for young people? Data is the starting point. So when you present those percentages around attendance, that is the starting point for those discussions. The conversations that ensue are all about, have you identified what the barrier is for attendance? What interventions are in place? How are you engaging families? What actions have you taken to ensure that the young person is ready to learn? and is engaged and wants to attend school. So that journey that young people have been on. So, for example, if you've got young people who are out of education or registered but not attending school, what does that journey look like for these pupils? And when you talk about those journeys and present them in the form of case studies, it becomes quite compelling evidence. So it's not about spreadsheets. It's about what are those leadership actions that have taken place to ensure that pupils attend school. Because when they start attending school, they will hopefully achieve, belong, and thrive. Those gain that reoccurring theme. Finally, in terms of reflection meetings, now this is quite important. Reflection meetings take place across all inspection days. There tends to be about 2 reflection meetings a day. And this is where leaders have an opportunity to engage in professional discussions with inspectors and they're presented with the evidence that has been gathered, but also the evaluations based on that evidence. And those reflection meetings seek to celebrate strengths, validate priorities, and highlight where there's more to do. And that is a terminology that we use: celebrate, validate, highlight. And this is where further conversations can take place around what to explore. By the end of the day one, there's already emerging conclusions. And through those reflection meetings, key judgments are beginning to be formed, but also questions may arise where further exploration is needed. And that's where planning for day 2 takes place as well. Most importantly, I wanted to focus on making sure that I wanted to leave you with these kind of really clear, 5 golden nuggets, so that you're prepared as well as you can be. We can talk about inspections day in, day out, but everyone's experiences are very different and everyone's context is very different. The best I can do is give you information and leave you with golden nuggets that you need to take into consideration when you are doing inspection readiness and you're preparing for that. So first is to make sure that when that initial planning meeting takes place, you have the right people in the room. You have the right people in the room during that planning meeting so that you can put your best foot forward when you're talking to the lead inspector, the HMI normally. Secondly, make sure that every leader in the school, regardless of what level of leadership you are, understands their roles, understands the priorities, and has clear evidence around the outcomes and the actions they've taken. Third, try and keep your documentation as current and as accurate as possible and make it accessible. Because when you make it accessible, it enables the questions get answered quickly and it enables inspectors to move on. Yeah. Fourth, focus relentlessly on outcomes for young people, because that will be discussed, especially under achievement. Outcomes is a key factor that can take schools from expected to needs attention or from expected to strong. And finally, one thing that I encourage and urge all schools to do is to regularly test that their practice is consistent across the school. Now, I know quality assurance processes are in place, quality assurance mechanisms are in place in almost every school and should be present, but testing that is really important, because what you don't want to do is inspectors go do their learning walks and things are arising that you're unaware of and you're unable to provide a rationale and reasoning for. So making sure that you're regularly testing those things that you say are happening are actually happening, because that will strengthen your inspection readiness. And I hope that's provided you with a useful overview of what inspection looks like and some practical insights to support. Jarrod.
Thank you for that. So lots of information there. And now I would like you to write into the chat any questions that you might have. While you're doing that, I'm going to be handing over to Sarah. So The big thing in all of this, no matter how prepared we are, it's a really stressful situation having an Ofsted inspection. So I don't know what's more stressful, watching England play in the World Cup or an Ofsted inspection at the moment, or maybe both. So handing over to Sarah, who will show us the toolkit.
Hiya, thanks, Jarrod. I can guarantee you, if you're using PeopleBunch, then watching England in the World Cup will be more stressful than your Ofsted inspection. Okay, so PeopleBunch is an all-in-one management platform for schools. Today, as we're talking about inspections, I'm going to show you the Ofsted Toolkit and how it works within the platform. So I'm just going to share my screen bear with me. And here you can see this is the Ofsted Toolkit within the platform. As you can see, it looks like the report card that you would get after an inspection. This is a work in progress. So the idea is that you use it as a working document and you work your way through it. I can see that the last review, I had an area that needs attention. If I click on that area, it will take me straight to that part, and it's the part where everything else got expected standard. However, teachers present information clearly, that got a needs attention. So what I can do is also within the platform, I can go over to my observations, which are my classroom observations. I can look at them and I can say, okay, they were actually improved. So I can go to expected standard and I can add my evidence against that. Evidence can be uploaded in the form of videos, documents, or photos. As you can see, if I go to the top now, my needs attention has completely disappeared. So that's how the toolkit works within the platform. Okay, so backing up what Nazya was saying, PeopleBunch does align with all of your Ofsted needs. It's got consistency, evidence, and outcomes all within one platform. If I move across, here are our contact details. You can scan the QR code here to go straight to the toolkit part of our website. All of my contact details are here. So if you want to, you can have a look at the website, sorry. So I'm going to hand back to Jarrod now, who will be doing some Q&As with.
Thank you so much. So we have a question here. Any suggestions about getting consistency when using supply cover, Nazya?
Yeah, so this is an issue that has arisen in a lot of inspections, especially when it comes to when there's a high level of supply teachers in settings. So it's really important that there is clear protocols around, especially if there's long-term supply, clear protocols around induction and support. If the systems are in place, if you have the right systems in place for supporting, making sure that there's leadership presence, especially when there's a lot of support, when you've got more than one supply teacher in, leadership presence plays a really big part in relaying expectations, setting those expectations, and making sure that young people, regardless of what's happening in terms of the teacher that's coming through the doors, they are provided with the right level of support and they are taught the curriculum that is intended. So that leadership presence, I would say, is probably the key to any kind of issues around supply. Yeah, some schools have more supply, some schools, they may have more than one supply, 2 supply teachers, 3 supply, 4 supply teachers. If that is the case, then there needs to be a wider strategy around recruitment and retention, obviously. But short-term supply, I would say leadership presence is probably the key. Inspectors won't go in and observe supply teachers. Mostly they don't. If there's concerns raised around, if leaders, for example, say, you know what, we've got a supply teacher in this class, in the maths class for this week, inspectors will probably leave that alone because it's not fair on those pupils and it's not fair on the teachers. And remember, we're testing typicality. So typicality is about what is the norm. So if there are supply teachers in that week, that may not be the norm. And so therefore it may be left well alone. If it is the norm, then inspectors will want to know, okay, what are you doing to make sure that those pupils are still getting the best deal? So what is a strategy that has been employed by school leaders to make sure that pupils get the best deal when it comes to their education?
Okay. How important is evidence compared to what inspectors actually see in practice?
It is equal. because the evidence, so the things that we see in terms of documentation, the data, the figures, attendance figures and engagement figures and figures around pupil participation in enrichment activities or clubs, those play a vital role in really establishing the right, it becomes a starting point for discussions. Because if the figures that you're presenting are inaccurate, are not representative, there's missing information, the question then that the inspectors will ask is around monitoring and leadership oversight. So that data and that information being presented is very important because, like I said, it's the starting point of any conversation that is had with an inspector.
Okay. And what does strong leadership look like through an inspector's lens?
Strong leadership is basically what's in the toolkit. And the toolkit really does talk about consistency. So the toolkit talks about the consistency, having the right systems in place, making sure that decisions are evidence informed. So you're not just making decisions for the sake of it. You're making decisions because actually you've gathered the information and you're making the decisions based on facts and figures that you have and that you've collated. So have a look at the strong standard within the toolkit, and it is very clear what strong is. Consistency, right systems, decision-making is based on evidence, and that there is clear oversight on all decision-making when it comes to every single evaluation area. And if leaders have clear oversight of that, then that's what strong leadership looks like.
I've got a question here for Sarah, actually. Sarah, what else does PeopleBunch do apart from the toolkit?
It's got 5 main sections. It has a people section, which will cover all of your safer recruitment and your single central record. There's a health and safety section, which will cover all your premises safety. There's a safeguarding section, which keeps your children safe. There is a regulation section, which is where the SIP will go and your policies and all your Ofsted regulations. And then there's the pathway section, which is where the toolkit can be found and any school audits can be held in there as well.
Thank you. What do inspectors want from governors?
So that conversation with governors is quite important. It's quite telling, actually. So the lead inspector, normally the HMI, will have that conversation with the governance or representation from governance. And really, it's about that strategic oversight. So do governors have accurate picture of the school's strengths and areas of improvement? So do they know them? Do they understand and know the school? Do they challenge leaders? How do they support the leaders? How do they monitor quality of provision? So these, and again, have a look at the leadership and governance evaluation area and expected. And again, it's really clear. What I would say is one of the things that has arisen from those inspections is, especially schools that have been part of the most recent inspection processes, they're quite shocked when they see inspectors open up the toolkit and literally refer to every single bullet point to make sure it's being met, because that wasn't done before. So it's quite new and it's quite different, because what actually happens during those reflection meetings is every single one of those inspectors, whether it's on their computer, whether it's a physical copy, will open up the toolkit and literally we will talk through the evidence gathered against every single point, every single paragraph within the standard that is being looked at, which is normally the expected standard, and that the evidence will be discussed. The evaluation of each of those points within that standard will be discussed, which tends to be quite shocking to inspectors, because if they to school leaders, but that is what happens. So it's really important that you look at those individual points and make sure, do I have evidence against each of these points within the standard?
What are the most common mistakes schools make during an inspection?
My advice would be trying to hide mistakes. If you want inspectors to unsee something they've already seen, they can't, because it becomes part of the evidence base. So it's better to be transparent and open with inspectors. In day one, if they saw inconsistencies in practice, be open and transparent about those inconsistencies, but also what is being done to tackle those inconsistencies. And then the second day, put your best foot forward and show consistency in practice. Ask inspectors to do more learning walks so that they can see the consistency. They can't undo what has already been seen. They can't take away from the evidence base, but they can always add to the evidence base. And adding to the evidence base secures judgments, it secures those gradings.
Okay. If an inspection were announced tomorrow, what would you advise school leaders to focus on first?
Really know your school. Know what the areas of development are, what are the strengths, because they will be seen. They will arise. If you've got 4 inspectors walking through the door, depending on the size of your setting, smaller settings may have 2 inspectors walk through the door. Larger settings can have anything up to 5 inspectors walking through, especially if there's quality assurance taking place. There might be a senior HMI involved as well. Inspectors will see things. It's a given. So what I would say is that be open and honest about the school, the challenges you have faced, where your priorities lie. Make sure you know your school and make sure your staff know your school. Make sure your staff know what the priorities are. Make sure your staff know that, what the focus points are and where the strengths lie within the school and what has been done to improve outcomes for young people. If staff know this and leaders know this, and there's actual genuine work happening, and the pupils are part of that journey, then it will become evident. If you say things which are not evident and which cannot be verified, then it will be seen, it will be picked up. And then the question then arises is there clear leadership oversight? And this is where leadership and governance can go into needs attention.
Okay. Sarah, I've got a question for you. Can the toolkit be downloaded or shared with the team?
Yep, the toolkit is completely downloadable along with all the evidence that goes along with it. As Nazya just mentioned, there's all those sections. All the sections will be downloaded in one comprehensive report along with the evidence as well on the platform. Any leadership member will be able to access the toolkit and have a look at any point.
Okay, thank you. Nazya, what are inspectors really looking for when assessing whether pupils achieve, belong and thrive?
It is all of the evaluation areas. Remember what I said about achievement. Achieve is not just about the achievement stand evaluation area. Achieve also means around the young people who have barriers to learning. How do you ensure that they're achieving? So it's not just about results, exam results. It's about how you're ensuring that those young people are making progress. When we talk about belonging, it's that focuses on so many different areas. If young people are motivated, engaged in lessons, they feel a sense of belonging. If there's strong adaptive practice and inclusive practice, it gives pupils a sense of belonging. If staff well-being is taken into consideration, that gives a sense of belonging. So belonging is from all these different angles, it's from all these different perspectives. And thriving is all about people flourishing within the school community. Our staff are provided with the tools to be able to do well in their role as a class teacher. Our leaders provided with the support needed to ensure that they are able to lead those areas that they lead and making sure that their departments are the best they can be. The resources are good, the planning is good, they're given the right level of training and support to ensure that they put in the right systems so that pupils can also thrive. So it's Achieve, Belong, Thrive is, again, a very multi-pronged approach. So don't just look at it from one lens, look at it from the all-encompassing way.
Okay. We are coming towards the end now, everyone. So if there's any more questions, please feel free to add it to the chat. My next question is, what role does attendance play in the inspection judgment today?
So behavior and attendance is a judgment area in itself. So if attendance is not expected, there will be issues there, and there will be questions raised through that attendance meeting. There is always someone on the inspection team who is responsible for following the thread of attendance. So from the focused leadership discussion around attendance, where those figures are presented, to the case studies, that discussion is vital to ensuring that evaluation area, behavior and attendance, meets the expected standard. If all behavior is met and attendance isn't, it takes you out of expected. So you need to give attendance the same value that you would give behavior. And attendance is there's some really specific requirements around attendance within the expected area. So you've got to make sure you meet that. Remember, under the new inspection toolkit, it's not about best fit. It's about the right fit, making sure that every single one of those standards or those bullet points within that standard are met as much as possible. That is what all inspectors look at. They're not looking at best fit. If one of those bullet points is missing, it could potentially mean, especially if it's an attendance one, it could potentially mean that it puts behavior and attendance into needs attention.
Okay, thank you. And that's it. We're coming to an end now. And I guess one of the big things I've written down was consistency, evidence, outcomes. When they all align, life is good when it comes to inspections. So I would like to give a big thank you to Sarah, a really big thank you to Nazya. Thank you so much. And a really big thank you to all of you who have attended. And till next time, thank you and goodbye.